My husband's family ranch has one rule that could steal my daughter's whole future. I was 7 months pregnant when my father-in-law walked into our kitchen with his estate attorney and a folder of guardianship papers, sat down at our table like he owned it, and told us our daughter would need to be placed under the same family stewardship every firstborn on that ranch has lived under for 6 generations. Full legal control over her medical decisions, her schooling, and every dollar she'd ever inherit, held by him, not by us, until she turned 25. My name is Marin. My husband Sawyer grew up on his family's cattle ranch in eastern Montana, 6,000 acres that have belonged to the Voss family since 1889. It's beautiful, and it's also the reason his family has one tradition I hated the moment I heard about it. Every firstborn grandchild who's set to inherit the ranch gets placed, at birth, into something the family calls the stewardship. It's not a nickname, it's an actual legal document, drawn up by the family's attorney, that hands full decision-making power over that child, medical, educational, financial, to whoever currently holds the ranch. Not the parents, the patriarch. Right now, that's my father-in-law, Holt. Sawyer's older sister, Callie, already lived it. Her son Beckett is 14 now, and I've watched Holt override her his entire life. When Beckett was 7 and broke his arm falling off a fence, Holt insisted the ranch's longtime large animal vet set it, not a pediatrician, because the hospital in town overcharges and takes all day. It didn't heal right. Beckett had it rebroken and reset 2 years later. When Beckett wanted to go to a 2-week science camp out of state at 12, Holt refused to sign the passport paperwork, saying, "Stewardship children don't need passports until they're old enough to understand what the ranch means." Callie fought him on both and lost both, because legally, it wasn't her call to make. The month we told his parents I was pregnant, Holt had already opened a custodial account in the baby's name, seated with $15,000 pulled straight from the ranch's operating fund, structured so only the ranch's current patriarch could authorize a withdrawal from it, ever, until the stewardship terms were met. He hadn't asked us. He'd just done it, and mentioned it the way you'd mention the weather. When Sawyer told his parents I was pregnant, Holt didn't ask how I was feeling or when we were due. He asked if we knew yet whether it was a boy, because the stewardship's always gone to whoever's next in line to run the place. His mother Deb said over dinner, "We'll get the paperwork moving early this time, so there's no scrambling like there was with Beckett." I laughed, because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. That night I told Sawyer there was no way his father was getting legal authority over our daughter's body and her money before she could hold her own head up. Sawyer agreed immediately. He'd watched what 14 years of it did to Callie and Beckett, and he said he'd rather walk away from the ranch entirely than do it to our kid. We decided that whatever the will eventually said about the property, our daughter's actual guardianship was staying with us, full stop. We thought saying it plainly, once, would be enough. We were wrong. The pressure started within days. Holt and Deb came by almost every afternoon that month with a new argument. Holt kept explaining that the stewardship protected the ranch from ever being split up by someone who didn't understand cattle, skipping over the part where it also meant he'd get final say on which doctor treated his own granddaughter. Deb started dropping off tiny cowboy boots and a hand-stitched blanket with the Voss brand worked into the corner, like the decision had already been made. Holt had his attorney, Foster Lang, mail us the stewardship agreement just to look over, sticky tabs already marking where we needed to sign. I told Holt directly, more than once, that we weren't doing it. He'd nod like he'd heard me, then bring it up again a week later as if I'd never spoken. I was 34 weeks along when my blood pressure spiked at a routine appointment. My doctor said the word preeclampsia and told me to come back in 48 hours. 2 days later, I was in the bathroom at 6 in the morning when I saw stars and had to sit down on the floor. Sawyer had left before dawn to fix fence on the far section, the one part of 6,000 acres where a cell phone is just a paperweight. I called an ambulance myself, then called the ranch house because it was closer than anywhere, and Deb picked up. By the time paramedics got me to the hospital, my blood pressure was high enough that the doctor on call said the safest thing for both of us was an emergency C-section. That morning, no waiting. A nurse asked if there was anyone I wanted called, and I gave her Sawyer's name and said he was somewhere out on the ranch and might take hours to reach. I remember being terrified. I remember very little else until I woke up in recovery and someone told me my daughter was healthy and already in the nursery. Holt and Deb were in the waiting room before I was even out of surgery. A nurse mentioned later that Holt had asked, twice, when he'd be allowed back to see me, and that he'd been carrying a folder the whole time. He got 15 minutes alone with me before Sawyer made it back. I was still groggy, still on a magnesium drip for the blood pressure, when Holt sat down beside the bed and told me Sawyer had called the ranch house from a neighbor's landline, that it might be another hour before anyone could reach him out on the section, and that given everything, my blood pressure, the early delivery, God forbid anything happens to either of you, it would give everyone peace of mind if the stewardship paperwork was finalized now, while he was here, so our daughter was protected no matter what happened next. I want to be honest about what I was thinking, because it matters. I was scared and tired, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking from the medication, and some part of me thought, it's just paperwork. It doesn't have to mean anything real. I can deal with it later once Sawyer's back. Holt had a pen out before I'd finished the thought. I signed. Deb signed as witness. Foster Lang, who I hadn't even realized was in the building, notarized it in the hallway outside my room 20 minutes later. Sawyer got back 4 hours later, dust still on his jeans, having ridden 2 hours on a borrowed ATV once a hand finally found him. He came in expecting to meet his daughter for the first time. Instead, I handed him a folder and said I was so sorry, and watched his face change as he read the words Stewardship Trust, Full Guardianship Authority, Holt Voss, Trustee next to a line with my signature already on it. Sawyer didn't yell. He sat down across from me holding our daughter and asked, very quietly, how this had happened, and I told him everything. He wasn't angry at me, not exactly. He was angry at his father in a way I'd never seen before. We assumed, naively, that once we explained I'd signed under duress in the middle of a medical emergency, someone would just undo it. Holt's answer, delivered at our kitchen table 4 days after we brought our daughter, we'd named her Wren, home, was that the document was legally binding, notarized, witnessed, and that revoking a stewardship hadn't been done in 6 generations and wasn't starting with us. Over the next 6 weeks, the campaign never let up. By week 2, Holt was offering to pay off our truck and put a down payment on a bigger house for the baby's sake. Conditional, he said plainly, on us not making this harder than it needs to be. By week 3, Deb had added me to a family group chat I didn't remember joining, 40-some cousins and aunts deep, where relatives I'd met twice took turns typing that I was punishing a baby over paperwork, and that every Voss wife adjusts eventually. I muted the chat after the 9th message that day. Sawyer didn't. He read every one, and quietly saved half of them without telling me why yet. By week 4, Deb had mailed the ranch's annual fall newsletter to the whole extended family 3 months early. Wren's hospital photo on the front. Taken, I later realized, without my permission, by Deb herself, in the recovery room while I was still asleep. Captioned, 7th generation, already home. Underneath it, 2 paragraphs about the stewardship and how grateful the family was that the tradition continued. Unbroken. My daughter, 5 weeks old, introduced to 200 relatives as a legal arrangement instead of a person. By week 5, at a family meeting Holt called at the main house, 3 aunts took turns telling me the stewardship had saved the ranch during a drought in the 90s, and that I was letting my feelings get in the way of 6 generations of sense. Callie sat next to me through the whole thing and said nothing, and I understood exactly what that silence cost her. I'll admit there were nights I wavered. Holt sat across from us that same week with a new number. He'd fund Wren's entire college education, in full, today, if we let the stewardship stand as written. Sawyer looked at me, and I heard myself say out loud, it's just paperwork. It doesn't have to mean anything real. The exact thing I'd told myself in that hospital bed, and hearing it come out of my mouth a second time, sober and clear-headed, made my stomach turn. Neither of us took the money. We tried a mediator, a woman named Denise Okafor whom Callie had used years earlier trying to get more say over Beckett's care. Holt agreed to 1 session, sat with his arms crossed the entire hour, and told Denise the stewardship wasn't a negotiation, it was a legacy, and that Wren would thank him for it in 20 years the same way, he insisted, Beckett secretly did now. Denise asked him directly whether he understood that showing up at a hospital with a notary during an emergency C-section might not reflect informed, unpressured consent. Holt said word for word, a ranch doesn't survive by asking permission. Neither does this family. Nothing was resolved. By week 6, Holt tried once more, sliding an envelope across our table with a check inside made out to Wren, $18,000, memo line reading, first tuition installment, stewardship honored. I told him we weren't cashing anything with strings sewn into it. He said we were being proud over paperwork. I told him it wasn't paperwork. It was our daughter's whole childhood, and I wasn't handing it to anyone, ranch or no ranch. We found a family law attorney, Priya Nair, who specialized in guardianship disputes. She told us the case had real legs, a stewardship agreement signed by one parent alone, hours after major surgery, medicated, under a documented medical crisis, with the other parent unreachable, was exactly the kind of consent a court could set aside, especially with proof it had been prepared in advance, not offered as a spontaneous kindness. That's when Callie came to us. She'd kept everything from Beckett's childhood. Every email where Holt overrode a school decision, a note from the vet about resetting Beckett's arm, texts where Holt told her flatly that stewardship isn't up for a family vote. She handed Sawyer a banker's box and said, I should have fought harder the first time. I'm not watching him do it to Wren too. She agreed to testify. We also tracked down Marcus Feld, the hospital's on-call notary, the one Foster Lange had apparently arranged to be standing by. Marcus told us, off the record at first, that it had struck him as strange. Attorneys don't usually happen to be in a hospital hallway with a notary seal 30 minutes after an emergency delivery, unless someone called ahead. When Priya asked him to put that in writing, he agreed. His statement said the paperwork had clearly been prepared before I went into labor, not after, and that in his professional opinion the timing raised real questions about whether my consent had been free. Priya filed the petition to void the stewardship in week 8, citing lack of informed consent and undue influence during a documented medical emergency. The hearing was in front of a family court judge named Alicia Wren. Sawyer testified about being unreachable for 6 hours on a section of the ranch with no signal. Deliberately, Holt had once bragged, because a man should be able to work without his phone buzzing. I testified about the magnesium drip, the fear, the folder already in Holt's hands before I'd even asked to hold Wren. Callie testified about Beckett, the arm that healed wrong, the missed science camp, 14 years of a grandfather's signature outweighing a mother's. Marcus Feld's statement went into the record confirming the notary had been arranged before my labor began. When it was Foster Lange's turn to explain why a notary happened to be standing by less than an hour after an emergency C-section, he paused a long moment and said the timing was coincidental, given the family's history of preparedness. Judge Wren asked him directly whether preparedness extended to keeping a notary on retainer near a maternity ward. He didn't have an answer for that. She ruled 12 days later. The stewardship was void for lack of informed, unpressured consent from both parents. Guardianship, medical, educational, financial, reverted fully to Sawyer and me. In her written opinion, she added a line Priya read aloud to us over the phone, because she knew it would matter more than the outcome itself. That a family tradition, however old, doesn't outrank a child's right to parents who consented freely to raising her. 6 weeks after the ruling, at the next ranch gathering, Holt learned the family had quietly voted, Callie leading it, 3 cousins and an aunt behind her, to strike the stewardship clause from the ranch's succession bylaws entirely. For every future grandchild, not just ours. The man who'd spent 6 generations insisting the family didn't get a vote on this didn't get one either. Wren is 7 months old now. She sleeps in a plain second-hand crib Sawyer and I picked out together at a shop 2 towns over. No brand burned into the headboard, nothing inherited. A few weeks ago, I found the hand-stitched blanket Deb had dropped off before Wren was even born. The one with the Voss brand worked into the corner, folded at the bottom of a drawer. I didn't throw it away. I just moved it underneath the blankets we actually use, close enough to keep, far enough not to reach for first. Every stewardship paper Holt ever drew up assumed our daughter's life belonged to the ranch before it belonged to her. It doesn't. It never did. Thank you for being here. If this one hit home, subscribe and I'll see you in the next story.